Hey everyone, I'm Gordon, partner at the LegalTech Fund, and welcome to In Studio with Qualytics. Joining me today for the second time in our recording studio is Gorkem Sevinc, founder and CEO of Qualytics. It's great to have you back in studio, Gorkem.
Thanks for having me, Gordon. Always a
Of
pleasure talking to you,
course.
my friend.
Last time we had you in studio, we unpacked the enormity of the data quality problem for modern enterprises, from the hidden costs of bad data to AI models and them being undermined before they even get started by bad data. And we ended on a very powerful point. Qualytics is automating 90% of the work enterprises still do manually today, and then the business impact that Qualytics creates as a result. Today, we're going to go deeper into product, into what's resonating with customers, and into where this market is heading. Gorkem, so for our listeners, can you paint the picture? What's the core problem you're solving, and why is it so costly for enterprises?
Yeah, of course. So let's start with this. Look, data quality is a hard problem to solve. And it has been a problem since the days of creating any kind of data and storing that data and using it for any kind of purpose. Now, why? You may ask why. Well, there are many places in which data quality goes wrong. Let's say that we have a person that is a salesperson, that is a sales ops person that is putting data into Salesforce. She's putting in $10, $12, $15, and she fat fingers it and makes it 150 for one lead that should not be an acceptable value, but it goes in. How many of us have seen that problem, right? Fat fingering issues happens all the time. That's as basic as it gets. It gets significantly more complex when you are thinking about I have business logic. I'm Apple. I'm selling this phone for between $1,500 to $2,000 in a specific zip code, and it can only fluctuate by 2% up and down. How do you actually make sure that you check towards that business logic that your business team is operating under? And how do you ensure that you communicate that to the data team? That becomes a massive problem. So, what's the status quo? The status quo of data quality is we wait for things to break and for somebody to yell at us before we prioritize a data asset. I may be a CEO, I may be a CFO, I'm looking at a dashboard and I see our CAC to LTV ratio is off. My muscle memory tells me this shouldn't be the reality. And then I go yell at somebody. I was the person that was being yelled at, right? Previous companies that I've been a part of, I was the one being yelled at for many reasons. And ultimately, I'm responsible of the data ecosystem. And then what do? We go do root cause analysis, identify what has gone wrong. And if we have time, we're going to write a piece of code, what we call a data quality rule, to catch that specific issue going forward. Now, that's a very
Sure.
reactive process. It does not scale. So I started Qualytics, Eric and we started Qualytics in the first place to address this problem. How do we actually turn from reactive to proactive? How do we actually, the question that we're looking to answer though, is not did I get the right amount of data at the right time? It's is my data fit for purpose? Now that question can be answered many different ways by many different people. And that's why thinking about your data quality, thinking about your data governance as a continuous improvement cycle is the most important thing. You're not just ever done with data quality. It's something that you have to do. That quality assurance is something that you have to co-own between data teams and business teams and make sure that everybody's
Yeah.
incentivized to
So
do it.
when a yeah, it's
How's that as
fantastic.
an
So when a
answer?
company realizes they have a data quality issue, and use the example of someone gets yelled at, like what's the like aha moment that says like, oh, we need Qualytics, and you become kind of undeniable.
Yeah, so well, take an first of all, there's the aha moment of realizing that you have the problem. That's different than saying this solution
Sure.
is my solution, right? The aha moment of I have this problem, you talk to executives, 73% of executives will tell you that they don't trust their data.
Wow.
65% of executives will tell you that they have made a bad decision in the last 6 months based off of bad data. So a lot of executives know this, and this is why companies are prioritizing hiring chief data officers. I don't know if you know this, Gordon, this stat, I don't know if we talked about it before. 10 years ago, only about 12% of Fortune 2000 companies had a chief data officer.
Okay.
The metric now is
Okay. Wow.
83%.
I wouldn't have expected that.
So those CDOs, what do? They prioritize three things: security and privacy of data, discoverability of data, and the governance of that data. Right? That's the person's job description and responsibility. And when they prioritize governance, you have to think about not just the tooling, but the people and the process piece. People, process, technology have to go hand in hand for any kind of governance function. And what we do at Qualytics is giving superpowers to those data governance teams, those data quality teams, to do more with less. We have customers that have 1.5 FTEs managing a global data quality program for one of the biggest asset managers in the world. How do they do that? Well, because they're using Qualytics and getting a lot of automation into the mix. And you said the 90% number earlier. It's actually now
Yeah.
95%. The 95% of the work that they would do is automated, but the 5% is undeniable. You cannot automate that 5%. And that 5% makes the system smarter. So I think the right way to think about data quality, data governance is
Yeah.
augmentation, not replacement
Okay.
of the FTEs.
So someone enterprise has made a decision to augment and use Qualytics. Walk us through that customer journey. What does that look
Mhm.
like from day one to a full implementation,
Yeah.
and what's that customer experience like?
So first of all, we love running proof of concepts with any, not any, but I mean, every customer that we have signed has gone through a proof of concept with us. And it's amazing to me. Every company's aha moment is a little different.
Interesting.
So what we do is we give you 30 days, unlimited, test our product out. And sometimes it's anomalies in the wild that we have found that they never knew about, and they know that that's a production issue, they need to go fix it. Sometimes it is that they have a very specific use case. I am moving from my legacy stack to my modern stack. I want to make sure this migration is going correctly. I've written the code correctly, and I'm going to run Qualytics. Qualytics is highlighting the differences for me. Or I have a reconciliation problem that I have to solve, and instead of having to write a million lines of code, I can actually turn on Qualytics, right? So anyways, every customer has this sort of like a little bit of a different journey for that first aha moment. But I don't think about only one aha moment. I think about my day one, week one, month one, quarter one value in multiple aha moments. And we see that across the board, right? So sometimes it's your first day, you turned on Qualytics, you turned on our profiling, we profiled all your data, we generated metadata, and you already see some stuff that you
Mm.
didn't expect. Day one, again, we generated data quality rules, and you see that for market segment, we saw these observed values, and you're like, wait a minute, that doesn't belong in there. Why is that in the rule? So you start interrogating with this baseline that we establish. Then your week one value becomes the anomalies, because now we have got a new data, and new data has anomalies in it. It almost always does. And those anomalies become a secondary aha moment because Qualytics automatically found anomalies for you. Again, like by week one, the secondary part that or tertiary part that we start focusing on is how do we supercharge the abilities of the business user, the data governance analyst, the data quality analyst, the business analyst that sits at FP&A. That person being able to come in and define their own rules in a low code, no
Interesting.
code environment, that gives us superpower. It gives them
I love it.
superpowers.
I love it. And you mentioned on your stat on CDOs, I think the Fortune 1000 or 2000. Is Qualytics relevant, certainly for enterprises of that scale? Is there an offering mid market SMB? Is there value out there, or where are you in that journey?
Absolutely. Look, every company that utilizes any kind of data is going to have a data quality problem. I am more optimized towards the enterprise and the
Yeah.
mid-market and up companies. We look for the kind of people that use Qualytics and get a lot of value are serious data practitioners. We do have startups that are using us that are data as a product companies. And it may be a team of 40, 50 people, but they are serious data people. So they are going to get a lot of value out of Qualytics. Typically, our ICP is the Fortune 2000. It's your financial services, it's your insurance, it's your commercial real estate, supply chain, manufacturing kind of use cases. SMB a little bit, but it's more about the serious data practitioners and where do we
Okay.
find those. Um, Data as a product companies typically are a really good fit because their revenue is direct line to the quality of the data that they are selling,
Yeah,
of
absolutely.
course.
I can imagine you're certainly uh, sticky customer there, and the ones that you're ensuring their livelihood based on protecting and driving the quality of their data.
Exactly. Yeah, we have one customer that estimated that they would spend about $6 million to try to replicate the amount of stuff
Yeah,
that we do for, and it's not their core value. Their core value is aggregation of data and selling that data and doing their own enrichment with ML based methods. So then they purchase from us and they're saving tons of money
yeah.
and getting
Well,
superpowers.
that's kind of interesting. A good segue. Want to talk about ROI, and that can mean something different depending on the enterprise or the leader. You can think things like cost savings or accuracy or compliance outcomes. What metrics matter most to you when you're selling, and or is that different depending on who the customer is?
That's a great question. So, look, we have been focused more on operational efficiency metrics so far. Like, I want to trust my data. What do I need to do in order to be able to trust my data? I need to have certain coverage of all my data ecosystem. And in order to get to that coverage, I would normally have to spend this much money, hire this many FTEs. Those FTEs have to work on writing code for the next 18 months so that we can get to some sort of maturity. And when I say maturity, I'm happy to tell you all about our data quality maturity model and coming to the later phases of data quality maturity where it's actually very difficult to get to that point if you are
Hmm.
doing this all manually. So it takes you 2 years, seven-figure investments to get to that point. So our main ROI right now is how do we replace the operational
Hmm.
efficiency of that? And you don't have to go hire 7 people to establish your data quality. You can do it with 1.5 persons and get to real value and later phases of the data quality maturity model immediately. Now, I also started, we have been thinking a lot about risk. What is the risk of data downtime? What is the risk of making a bad decision? And there is the compounding cost of bad data paper that came out in 1992 that talks about the 110-100 rule of data quality. So this is amazing to me, right? How relevant it is still today. Let's say that we have that person that was putting
Sure.
data into Salesforce
Yeah.
and she fat finger things. If she catches herself putting that data into Salesforce and corrects it, it costs the company only $1 to correct that mistake, right? Because you caught it as close to the source as possible. If a later system catches that issue and you remediate it and you clean up that bad data, it costs the company $10
Okay.
to address that issue. If you have made a bad decision off of that bad data, it has cost the company at least $100. Now, this gets even more interesting with the AI world that we are
Yeah.
starting to live in now, where with AI, we are all trying to make every employee at an enterprise to be a data analyst, right? Previously unknown insights that you can bring up to your analysis. Do I trust the insights that you have generated? But the answer is a resounding no if I don't have a good data governance, good data quality frameworks in place. Now, I feel very strongly that the 110-100 rule becomes 110-100,
Interesting.
1000. 1,000 being the AI driven insights that are
Yeah,
pretty
it's
exciting.
fascinating. It sounds like maybe you got a research paper in your future here around this topic, and
Perhaps.
that's awesome. Well, ahead of this conversation, I was reading up again, making sure I was smart on the business. Saw some people calling you the Ferrari of data quality. I don't know if that's a self-coined term or not, but I love it, and I think it lends itself to just a great picture of what Qualytics is. But curious, like, what do you think that means in practice? And then you just brought up AI. Like, what does that mean in the new world where there's these new AI driven tools and people making kind of bold promises of what they can do?
Yeah, that's I love that term because you can call us the Ferrari of data quality, you can call us the Porsche of data quality, Bugatti of data quality. The point is that we have gone very, very, very deep. Or when you look at our data quality rules and how deep we go, we're not talking about one order of magnitude difference with competition. It's like at least two orders of magnitude difference with how deep we go. And that's really exciting to us. That also means that it changes our ICP to the serious data practitioners. It means that if you have a cute little snowflake and you have like, you have like 20 data points and you have a nice little dashboard, I'm not a good fit for you. I'm overkill. Absolutely overkill. You're not going to take the Ferrari to the grocery store. I mean, you can, but that's not the purpose of that, right? And our purpose is like, you're a massive company, you have very big data operations, you are a global bank, you are a global asset manager. I'm a great fit for you. You have millions of data fields and trillions of records. Absolutely, I'm built for you. We built for that horizontal and vertical scale because that's the background that Eric and I come from, where we, you know, I've I've had so many cases of I've thousands of systems, not hundreds of systems,
Yeah.
sending me data, and I have my data lake, my data soup, my data warehouse. I'm doing all sorts of derivative uses of that data. I have massive teams that are dependent on that data. That's what we started with. Now, of course, there are smaller sets of value that you can get out of Qualytics, but again, like we're more geared towards the serious
Yeah,
data
I love it. I
practitioners.
love it. I want to talk about compliance a little bit. You talked a little bit about in the conversation about ROI and kind of risk of data. Want to bleed that into compliance though. Are you seeing whether or not it's from regulators, then from regulators to executives? Are they treating data governance differently today, and perhaps a regulatory environment that increasingly gets more and more onerous or robust for these companies to manage?
Yeah, it's in that's very much verticalized. So in the banking industry, there are SEC and OCC regulations on what's called data controls. Data controls are data quality checks. So the the bigger banks have to do this and are regulated to do so, and they have to have regulators are looking for full explainability around, you find an anomaly, here is the control that found that anomaly, why did you write that rule, who wrote that rule, how did you generate it, how did you test it, how did you validate it, what did you do with the anomaly that you have found. That all has to be existent, and I love that, right? I wish other industries followed banking as much. We're very tight with banking data, but we're not as tight with our healthcare data. Like there are some, I wouldn't call it regulations, but best practices around healthcare data that is being used for data quality purposes, but it's not regulated as much, right? I come from the HIPAA
Right.
high tech world where you have the guidelines and then you get fined sometimes, but you're not regulated as often as banking is. There are some best practices in commercial real estate and as well, and there are some frameworks, but regulators, also in the insurance industry, regulators
Sure.
jump into this problem of premium leakage as well. Um, but generally speaking, I would argue it's not enough, and but it's interesting because also not only compliance folks, but also risk folks are starting to get more involved in
Yeah,
data
that's awesome.
governance.
That's awesome. Yeah, totally.
If that makes sense.
All right, data tooling as a whole. Um, I've been blown away by some of your recent traction and kind of the growth in the business. And certainly involves selling into your ICP and the buyer and champion, which may come from a data team. You've kind of alluded to as well, though. It's important for you to kind of cross the chasm into the business unit or user. Just can you talk a little bit about how you found success doing that, so you become kind of integrated or woven throughout an organization, and are there areas or things you're still trying to improve, or any friction in that process for you?
Absolutely. So I have some principles. These principles start with I am here to supercharge you, not replace you. Right. So even if we do go through a top down sales motion, I still want to identify the champion and make that champion into the expert. That champion should really fully understand what we do and become an internal champion for how we should be adopted. Right. That's a very, very important principle for us to follow, because we're not we're not in this to just say, here's the tool, go have at it. Good luck. If I just throw something over the fence and say, like, here's my documentation, good luck, I'm too busy for you, I'm never going to succeed. At
Yeah,
least not to my expectations, right? So my expectations is we build relationships with the folks that are trying us out. Those people are going to have ideas. I want to hear those ideas. I want to know those ideas. My engineering team jumps at those ideas because it's the practitioners that know their problems the best, and I want to hear from them. I want to know, like, when they say, oh, I wish you had XYZ, and if I could do X, it can create this value for me. We will take that back to our customer advisory board. We'll share it with other customers, and when there's more than one person that says, yes, I need this, fantastic, we're going to build that. 75% of our product roadmap in the last 2 quarters was driven by customer and
that's
prospect
fantastic.
requests.
I mean, I think that's absolutely critical, that feedback
I,
loop. I think so many people miss that, even
super important.
establishing the customer advisory board and creating the mechanisms to receive that feedback.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And during a POC, you may have a champion that is going to try out the product, and how do they present this opportunity back to the economic buyer? That's something we think about as well. I know how to calculate ROI for data quality, data governance. So I share those calculations, the assumptions, and everything with my champion, and have that champion actually utilize those metrics, utilize those best practices. Here's what everybody else is doing. Here's what we should be doing. Sometimes it's not even needed. Sometimes the prospect comes in so hot that they don't need all these additional proof points. But most of the time, we want to follow the process. The process is, you did a POC. Here's what your data ecosystem looks like. Here's the value that we saw during the POC. Here are your business use cases that you were looking to solve. Here's what we have already solved. And here's what the future looks like. Here's the ROI, what that looks like.
Love.
I want to supercharge that champion, right? And I have this other principle, Gordon. Maybe you'll disagree with this. As an investor, you will probably disagree with this, but I want to fly under the radar of the CFO. So I'm not trying to price optimize to the
Gorkem, I like
maximum
the
amount
idea
of
of
dollars that I
maximizing your
can
contracts.
squeeze
Let's
out
be
of the
honest.
customer. Yeah, of course you do. But that's not the mode that we're operating in. We want to focus on the value that we're
Yeah, I think
providing
you're.
to
I think you're
customers.
absolutely right. Joking aside, I think with your business, as you think about the relationships that you're creating, the long term nature of those contracts, you want to delight that customer, and it sounds like you're integrating the customer in the feedback process to making sure you're delivering for them. Which is kind of a good segue to the
Exactly.
last question. You've been very kind to spend almost 25 minutes with me here talking about your business. I know you're busy, so want to get you back to your day job here. But I'm going to ask you to pull out your crystal ball here. And actually, your 110, 100, and then 1000 framework, I think, is kind of relevant here. And so I want you to opine on kind of the expectation of data explosion over the next, call it, decade, with much of that driven by AI. Talk about how that impacts your roadmap at Qualytics and how you lend itself to the vision you want to build for the business and how you become is absolutely critical.
Mm. Yeah, it's a great question. So look, 5 years ago when we started the company, we were a nice to have for a lot of companies and must have for a smaller amount, because that smaller amount were the ones that were doing really, really complex things with their data, and they understood the importance of data governance. Today, significantly more companies understand the importance of data governance. Significantly more companies are reaching out to us saying, hey, I want to talk to you, I'm interested, which was not the case 5 years ago, right? Well, what changed? The derivative uses of data has changed. BI was cool. AI is here to stay, and AI is enabling us to do all these derivative uses of data and enabling us to do significantly more with less. So what that means to us is, look, we already built a foundation that supports those use cases of today. But the goalpost is changing every day with AI adoption in enterprises. It is an interesting metric that I've seen, just based on my experience, that less than 10% of enterprises actually have AI in
Interesting.
production. A lot of them are doing POCs. A lot of them are doing testing them out,
You
but
wouldn't
the
know that
goalpost
based on
is
the
changing all
conversations
the
we have
time.
and
And
what our friends out there tell us.
but I look at every
Yeah.
single vertical, right? I'm looking at financial services, supply chain, manufacturing. There are AI use cases with real production data is less than 10% today, but it's going to be 20% maybe by the end of the year, right? It's the adoption. Every board is talking about what are they going to do about AI and how are they going to adopt it? Which means, what are the CDOs doing? What are the CDAOs doing? They're thinking about, I need to get my house in order. I need to move from legacy stacks to modern stacks. It's inevitable. I need to invest in the infrastructure that supports it. I need to invest in data governance as not just a capability, but as part of my culture. And it's a culture shift that is happening that we're feeling today. Our product roadmap doesn't just change. It sort of evolves with those use cases, right? So if you have a lot of structured data, great, I'm going to jump in there and I'm going to provide a lot of value. The next step is like going towards semi-structured data. And eventually there's some stuff that we're going to do on the unstructured data side, not looking at images and finding anomalies in images, but there's some value that we can provide around, again, the governance that you would want to do around
Yeah,
unstructured
I
data.
love it, and I think we're very bullish on what you're doing and building at Qualytics. I'll say the way you just framed it from maybe what 5 years ago was a nice to have for many, a need to have for few. That's flipping when you think about the world we are today and really where we're going to be
Yes,
in a short period of time. So gets me excited for the future for you and the business. But Gorkem, thank you again for joining
absolutely.
us in studio today. Thank you for your partnership with the LegalTech Fund. Of course,
Thank you
look
for
forward to
having
having you
me.
next time.
Awesome.